Nobody moved. For a moment, the entire stadium seemed to hold its breath. The cheering hadn't fully faded. The scoreboard still read 4-0. The Dodgers had just won. Shohei Ohtani had just done something that most people would spend the rest of their lives trying to explain. And yet, none of that mattered in the next 30 seconds. Because what happened on that field after the final out was not in any rulebook. It was not in any pre-game scouting report. It was not something Dave Roberts had prepared for. Nobody had. 3 Padres players walked toward Ohtani. Not to congratulate him. Not to shake his hand. They moved with a kind of energy that didn't belong in a post-game handshake line. One of them reached out, grabbed Ohtani's bat, and snatched it away. Roughly. Deliberately. Then they threw it aside like it was nothing. Like it was just a piece of wood. And then Manny Machado stepped forward. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out an envelope. A letter. He placed it directly into Ohtani's hand. Ohtani looked at it. He didn't open it immediately. He just held it. That was the moment Dave Roberts came running. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened after the final out, you first have to understand what happened during the game itself. This was not just another May series. The Dodgers and the Padres do not play each other casually. There is history between these two franchises. There is geography. There is rivalry. And on this particular night, there was Shohei Ohtani standing in the batter's box before a single Dodgers pitcher had thrown one pitch. Randy Vasquez toed the rubber. He had prepared. He had studied. He knew what Ohtani could do with a bat. And still, none of that preparation was enough for what came next. 153.7 kilometers per hour. That was the fastball Vasquez threw. 179.1 kilometers per hour. That was the exit velocity off Ohtani's bat. 121.3 meters. That was how far the ball traveled before disappearing into the stands. The stadium didn't just cheer. It erupted. The kind of eruption that makes the walls of a ballpark feel thin. The kind that makes grown men grab the person sitting next to them. The kind that takes a full minute to settle back down into something resembling quiet. Ohtani didn't celebrate wildly. He rounded the bases the way he always does. Focused. Present. Already thinking about the mound. Because that was the other half of the equation. When Ohtani walked to the mound in the bottom of the first inning, the Padres dugout was not panicking. They had a plan. Extend his at-bats. Make him throw more pitches than he wanted to throw. Tire him out before the game reached its critical moments. For 4 innings, that plan was working. Ohtani was not untouchable. The Padres were putting together quality at-bats. They were fouling off pitches. They were working deep into counts. The pitch count was climbing. And in the 5th inning, everything they had been building toward finally arrived. Bases loaded. 1 out. Fernando Tatis Jr. at the plate. The stadium felt different in that moment. Even Dodgers fans, the ones who had been celebrating since the first pitch home run, felt something shift. This was the inning. This was the moment the Padres had been engineering since the first pitch. If Tatis Jr. came through here, this game had a completely different story to tell. Ohtani stood on the mound. He looked in at his catcher. Then he looked at Tatis Jr. Dave Roberts called time. Pitching coach Mark Prior jogged out. The visit lasted about 30 seconds. No long speech. No complicated tactical adjustment. Prior would say later, in the quietest part of the press conference, that all he wanted was for Ohtani to take a breath. To find his footing again. To remember where his release point was. 30 seconds. Then Prior walked back to the dugout. Ohtani set. He wound up. He threw a sweeper. Tatis Jr. hit a ground ball. 6-4-3, double play. Inning over. Ohtani roared. He clenched his fist so hard it looked like it might break. Not the roar of a superstar celebrating a highlight. The roar of a man who had been pushed to the very edge of his limits and had refused to fall off. The Padres dugout went silent. The game ended 4-0. The Dodgers won the series 2-1. The bullpen finished what Ohtani started. 5 scoreless innings from him. Zeros from everyone after him. Clean. Professional. Complete. But the final out was not the end of the story. It was actually where the story got complicated. What happened next unfolded in the span of less than a minute. But it was the kind of minute that people would be talking about for much longer than that. 3 Padres players approached Ohtani near the baseline. Their body language was not the body language of men coming to offer respect. There was tension in the way they walked. There was something deliberate in the direction they moved. One of them reached out and grabbed Ohtani's bat. He didn't ask. He didn't gesture toward it. He took it. Roughly. The kind of grip that had intention behind it. Then they threw it aside. The bat hit the grass and slid several feet before stopping. People in the lower sections saw it happen in real time. Others saw it on the broadcast replay. Either way, the reaction was the same. A kind of stunned silence followed by a wave of noise that didn't know whether it wanted to be confusion or outrage. Nobody was sure what they had just witnessed. And then Manny Machado stepped forward. Machado is not a quiet presence. He never has been. In his career, in his rivalries, in his moments of conflict and competition, Machado has always been someone who takes up space in a story. But this was different. This wasn't the Machado who plays with an edge. This was the Machado who had something to say. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out an envelope. White. Sealed. A letter. He walked directly to Ohtani and placed it in his hand. Ohtani looked at it. Just for a moment. The expression on his face was unreadable. He didn't open it. He didn't hand it back. He held it with the kind of stillness that suggested he understood, at least partially, what this was. What was in that letter? Nobody on the field said anything immediately. Nobody on the broadcast team had an answer. The camera zoomed in. The crowd murmured. And for about 4 seconds, the only thing happening in that entire stadium was Shohei Ohtani standing on the baseline holding an envelope that Manny Machado had just handed him. 4 seconds. Then Dave Roberts came running. Roberts moved fast. Not the jog of a manager doing his routine rounds after a win. He was moving with purpose. His eyes were on the envelope. His expression was the expression of a man who had suddenly realized something was happening that he had not authorized and did not intend to allow. He reached Ohtani in seconds. Without stopping, without saying a word that the cameras could clearly pick up, Roberts reached out and took the envelope from Ohtani's hand. Then he tore it. Not gently. Not in a way that left room for interpretation. He tore it the way you tear something when you want everyone watching to understand that what was inside no longer exists. The pieces fell to the grass near the baseline. The 3 Padres players who had grabbed the bat were still nearby. Machado had not moved. He watched Roberts tear the letter without flinching. His expression was calm. Almost like he had expected it. Roberts said something to Ohtani. Short. Direct. Then he put his hand briefly on Ohtani's shoulder and guided him toward the Dodgers dugout. Ohtani walked with him without looking back. The press conference room afterward carried a different kind of weight than usual. Reporters had seen the bat incident on the broadcast. Some had seen the letter exchange in real time from their positions near the field. By the time Roberts sat down in front of the microphone, the questions were already lined up and loaded. A reporter asked about it directly. No warm-up. No preamble. What happened after the final out? What was in the letter Machado gave Ohtani? Why did you tear it? Roberts placed both hands flat on the table in front of him. He took a breath that the room could hear. His voice, when it came, was controlled. But underneath the control was something harder. Whatever was in that letter was not something that needed to reach Shohei tonight. That's all I'm going to say about that. The reporter pushed. Was it threatening? Was it a message from the organization? Roberts shook his head slowly. I'm not going to characterize it. I made a decision in the moment. I stand by it. Another reporter asked about the bat. About the three players who had grabbed it and thrown it aside. Roberts paused longer this time. His jaw tightened slightly. That's not the kind of thing that should happen on a baseball field after a game. Those are the moments that define what kind of competitor you are. Winning or losing. Both sides. He didn't name names. He didn't escalate. But there was nothing soft in what he said. On the other side of the building, the Padres interim manager Craig Stanton sat in front of his own microphone. He had already addressed the loss. He had already talked about Ohtani being unfair, about the sweeper in the fifth inning, about the bases-loaded moment that slipped away. But now the questions shifted. 3 of your players grabbed Ohtani's bat after the game and threw it. Machado handed Ohtani a letter. How do you respond to that? Stanton did not look surprised by the question. He looked like he had been waiting for it. He leaned forward slightly. Clasped his hands together on the table. Players have feelings after games like this. Especially games like this one. I'm not going to tell you that everything that happened out there was planned or endorsed. But I'm also not going to pretend that this team doesn't feel things deeply. He paused. As for the letter. That was between Machado and Ohtani. I don't know what was in it. That's the truth. Somebody in the room said they found that hard to believe. Stanton's eyes moved toward the voice without his head turning. Believe what you want. I'm telling you what I know. Later that night, in the quieter corners of the internet, the theories were already forming. Some said the letter was a message of respect. A private acknowledgement from one competitor to another. Some said it was something else entirely. Something darker. Something that Roberts had recognized immediately and refused to allow into Ohtani's world that night. Nobody had the pieces of the torn envelope. Nobody had photographs of what was written inside. What everyone had was the image of Roberts running across the baseline. Reaching out. Tearing. And Ohtani walking back to the dugout. Calm. Eyes forward. Already somewhere else in his mind. Mark Prior, when asked about it briefly near the clubhouse entrance, gave the shortest answer of the night. Shohei handled it the way he handles everything. He didn't react. He just moved forward. Prior didn't say anything else after that. He didn't need to. Because that was the truest thing anyone said all night. The bat had been thrown aside. The letter had been torn apart. The series had been decided. And Shohei Ohtani had already moved on to whatever came next. That is either the most admirable thing in the world. Or the most unsettling. Depending on which side of the baseline you were standing on.